Chris, we're back.
We are, mate. Happy to be here.
And we're minus our bald, glamorous assistant this time round, but we're going to more than make up for it.
Hopefully. That's the plan.
And the format that we always do varies each time. We've got maybe 7 or 8 in the archive now for people to look back on. And just this morning when you were saying on your Instagram story, what a Tuesday I've got ahead of me, on-camera conversations later, I sent you a screenshot with a guy that was like, when are Chris and David back on? They're hilarious.
Yeah, that was a nice ego boost to start my Tuesday for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So this time round, we're going to do green flags and red flags, and the things that we obviously rail against and maybe we've been burnt by before, we don't look for when it comes to brain body business, and then the exact flip of that, the positive, because I think it's easy nowadays to have these negative podcasts where we slate everything.
Yes.
But it's good to give somebody something away that they can do too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Obviously we're more wired to go towards the negative side of things, aren't we? That's how we're wired to speak in our conversations and stuff. So yeah, it'd be good to go see a balance between the two and see how we get on.
That's right. So I guess the first category we're going to talk about is red flags and green flags within brain. And you're first up with a red flag, Chris. Take us away.
Yeah, it's oversharing with either in person or on social media. I just find that's a big red flag in somebody's mindset. Like, this goes back to, like, see when I was working, like, not like literally like a 2-minute walk from where we are right now in hospitality. Anybody that's worked in hospitality will tell you, you get all sorts of weird and wonderful characters coming to work here, and the staff turnover is really high. So we used to get some absolute freak shows coming into work. And the one thing that was common amongst all of the worst ones was they would come in, they would tell you, like, their entire family history, their issues, everything within, like, an hour of being on shift. You're like, mate, you have just got a job here. This is I'm trying to show you how to serve bread, and you've told me that your dad had a secret family. Like, that was the one lassie told me her dad had a secret family because she was from Islay and he had a secret family on the mainland. And I was like, listen, love, what is going on here, man? You know, so I just feel like, I don't know, obviously it may be somebody that has the insights will be able to tell you why that is such a kind of a red flag in somebody, but I just find, like, are you trying to force a connection here? What are you trying to do? Why are you dumping all this information on me? Same goes for social media. If you're oversharing your whole life and all the ins and outs of it, it's like some things are meant to remain within the home, eh?
I think the social one's the one that we all can recognise when somebody's maybe sharing a bit too much. And for me, I think it's a little bit of a cry for help sometimes.
Yeah.
But let's be selective who we cry for help to, rather than just unloading in general. And there's probably like a processing phase that somebody's going through, or if it's a character that does it just all the time to everyone and anyone, that's definitely a red flag.
Huge red flag. You know, you could probably put the people that check in at hospitals on Facebook in that category as well. That's a huge red flag. Check into hospital with the praying hands, you know, and they're there just for like a random checkup.
Just ready for the comment to be like, you okay, chick?
You okay, hun? Yeah, DM me. Oh, man. Yeah, that's a huge red flag. Huge red flag.
I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook, but that's probably the kind of people that are still using the app a lot.
I would imagine so. I've got to go on like a couple of times a week for a client to check into it, and sometimes you go on and, like, if you go anywhere near the feed, you're like, oh my God, get me away from that.
Yeah, like people from school that you've not engaged with for a long time for a good reason. And you're seeing their stuff and you're like, there's a reason that we don't talk anymore.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
That oversharing piece, I wonder what it hints towards in terms of, like, you maybe wouldn't want to deal with them from like or like it's maybe challenging them from a brain perspective, because it's not out yet. We'll probably release this episode in advance, but I spoke to an author called George Perez, and he wrote a book called The Shut the Fuck Up Method. And everyone nowadays got the F in the title after Mark Manson's book.
Manson started that, yeah.
Which is obviously a good format. And he was saying to me that it can be really helpful if you have one confidant that you share things with. So, for example, if something's going really wrong with work or family or health, you tell one person who's like your trusted advisor, and they're the person that you maybe say, things are a bit tough at the moment, like we've just had this in the business, like a legal issue, or we've had a big bill come in that we were not expecting. But when anyone else asks you about business, you say, yeah, things are good, cracking on. And you have that one person that you trust and you share with and you unload and you maybe share a little bit of negativity with. But everyone else you just put on a positive front to mean that you're almost protecting your energy from putting that negative energy round and round and round again with everyone you speak to. Yeah.
I think, like, see what you say that, did it maybe think, like, maybe it's something to do with, like, it shows a certain level of, like, social intelligence, so you can understand who a person is, the relationship you have with them, the context of your conversation, and the type of information that you're going to share with them, really. So I think, like, when you know somebody is able to do that, then it's that again the opposite. That's a green flag. It's like, yep, okay, I know that you know how to handle yourself in different situations. If you've got somebody, because even people say like, oh, I'm the same way no matter who I'm talking to. I'm like, that's not a good thing, mate. That's a terrible thing. Like you actually, I'm not saying you have to become a totally different person, but you have to adapt to the different environments and conversations you're having. You can't just be the same. Like if I was the same that I am with, like in the group chat with my mates that I've been pals with since high school, and when I'm talking to a new client, I wouldn't have any new clients. You know, I'd probably be in jail, like along with the rest of us.
Yes.
You know, you're not the group chat version of yourself in a professional setting. And I think like the oversharing piece probably hints at the fact that like you actually really don't understand like what's appropriate. I think that's what it comes to, what's appropriate and what you should be sharing here. And that this isn't me saying at all that you shouldn't be sharing things. Like I said, you should have, I've got trusted confidants. I've got, got my wife, I've got close friends that, I would share pretty much everything with. I would share absolutely everything with my wife. I would share pretty much everything with my close friends. But yeah, there's no need for that to then spill out into other situations where it's just, again, totally not appropriate.
It doesn't help you.
It really doesn't.
I don't think it serves you, and it's not filtering yourself or being inauthentic. It's just having a level of awareness of what's going to be helpful for your relationship with that particular person. And in the same way, if I was to really strawman the argument, I can hear somebody being like, oh, Chris, but you're saying not to share things. You're saying share with the people to its full extent that really can benefit you and can support you with something that's going on. Yeah. Not just every Tom, Dick and Harry in the workplace or that you bump into, or God forbid, just happens to be watching your Instagram story when you're doing the whole crying thing.
Yeah, exactly. If you manage to hit record before you start crying, that's quite remarkable. That. I just don't. I just think it shows that you're kind of a bit more measured if you understand who you can share things with, who you can't, and also like. You ever been in a social setting before and like somebody just like overshares and it totally kills the vibe? You just try to have a laugh and then, and somebody's like, I think I'm going to get divorced from my wife. Like, what? Mate, we were just shooting the shit and just having a laugh, and now you've just totally brought the vibe down, And I just, again, it's just a thing that's, I think it just shows that side of the person. They're just not quite got that. I don't mean, so when I say social intelligence, I'm not saying they're stupid. Don't mean it in that way. I just mean like they don't really understand the context of the situation they're in. Yeah. And again, what's appropriate and what's going to move the conversation on and what they should be talking about. And they're just dumping the first thing that comes into their head, then comes out their mouth, and you've got to then deal with the aftermath. I just
feel really sorry that those people, maybe if they haven't got those people that they can trust to share it with, they're just spreading it for all to hear.
That's a real shame.
And I feel really sorry for them, but I don't think the majority of people that were calling that as a red flag are in that situation.
No, I mean, I would genuinely have them exempt from that rule, because I mean, that I have absolutely no idea what that's like. I have always, my entire life,
one to turn to.
Had somebody to turn to, regardless whether it's a parent or a close friend. I have always had that. I've never once felt alone in that regard, so I don't know what that's like. But like I said, I'm not going after those people. I'm going after the ones that we all know who I'm talking about. The oversharers that are just an absolute fun sponge.
Let's get into my first red flag then, Chris, when it comes to brain. And that's negative self-talk about yourself and others.
Okay.
And there's a little bit of a link there, because those people that are oversharing are probably oversharing something quite negative. Or of course, somebody might be oversharing something really positive, like just made my first deal and it's a bit flashing in your face. But those that perpetuate negative self-talk all the time about themselves in public and to other people, and maybe speak negatively about other people all the time, I would hate to be inside their head for a long period of time, because I think it's a case of they maybe don't like themselves an awful lot and they're verbalizing it continually. So like disparaging self-talk, and you're just off the back of the 12-week peak, for example, which is a hard diet where you're getting lean. People who go into that with, oh, I always fail the diets that I start, or, oh, I'm just greedy, or I can never control my food, or I can never stick to a hard training program. Those negative self-talk attributes and phrases that they constantly use become their true identity over time, because they live up to the words that they put out there. And that sounds quite spiritual, doesn't it? But I've seen a massive overlap in the people that have language that is continually negative or disparaging about themselves, and the outcomes that they then get down the line from that.
100%, yeah. I mean, I think even if you scale it back a little bit, like from my personal experience of 12-week peak, I've never dieted hard before, ever in my life. I've always been in decent shape, not photo shoot shape, but I've always like played sport and things, played rugby, so I've never really been that bothered about like, I'm going to go on a really hard cut. Obviously, 20 years old, you're trying to get rid for Malia, So you look, you look good in the strip and your vest. But outside of that, never done a proper diet before. But I always used to tell myself I'm not that bothered about getting lean, and I had to stop saying that to myself at the 12-week peak. I'm like, stop saying you're not bothered. You obviously are. You've signed up for this program, so you're absolutely right. What you do say, as much as it might sound woo-woo, what you do say does have an impact. And if you take that to what you're saying about negative self-talk, I couldn't imagine the kind of things that. So would you think that because you've got negative self-talk, it then bleeds over into what you then say about others, which would typically probably manifest itself in the context we're talking about, like jealousy? So like if you're
Gossip.
saying I never stick to a diet, and then you see somebody that smashes a 12-week peak, like they've got years of experience ahead of me, or they must have been on steroids, like all you jealous PTs are saying. I see the posts
Mad,
raging because MTN get 5,000 more results than you'll ever get. But yeah, so I think like it probably manifests itself in that way.
If you don't like yourself, you quite often lash out at others as well.
Yeah, I imagine you would. Yeah, I suppose that's. I mean, I think like if it's negative like self-talk, then when it's manifesting for other people, then it will be things like gossip, and it can get quite nasty as well. Very, very personal. You're probably quite, would you say, judgmental of other people as well. You always have this view of them that they've had because I don't know, my head goes to how you're always comparing yourself to other people in terms of what they've achieved in whatever category we're talking about, and you're always positioning it as like the easiest ride ever. You're always saying like, oh well, they had a better start in life, or they had better connections, or they had a better starting point. And I think if that is your negative self-talk towards other people, you're never going to take inspiration from others, which is probably one of the most powerful things that you can do. I mean, we're social creatures. Like, if you look around and you see other people and you're like, you know what, I think, yeah, like Colin's had an incredible sales career, and he started from the bottom at an entry-level job, and he's worked his way up, and he's got this book of clients, and he's moved company, and he's really made a name for himself. If I just saw that as like, Colin, he must have done a start, like his dad knew somebody, and he probably getting in at this company. It's like, what's going to benefit you more in life? What type of attitude? And I would say it's probably thinking more positively about other people, isn't it? And maybe seeing a wee bit of yourself in them.
Definitely. One of the first podcasts we did as a roundtable, I think for episode 100, was Why That Quote, and we spoke about comparison is the thief of joy. Mm-hmm. And we all almost disagreed with it to say that if you compare yourself to people and take inspiration from them, then that's a really positive trait to have. And like we're almost encouraged that, oh, that guy's doing amazing. I wonder what he's doing for his sales process, or I wonder what Chris is doing for his creativity, for his copywriting, or I wonder what David's doing to get so many clients in great shape, rather than like automatically defaulting to like, and again, I think I've got a phrase later on, like must be nice, where somebody's like, oh, must be nice for you.
Oh, see that? Oh man, that just makes your blood boil, that phrase, doesn't it? Like, oh, I must be nice, all right for some, must be nice. Like, that just reeks of just like the absolute worst type of person. Just jealousy, just resentment coming out their pores, like just absolutely no awareness of even just taking stock of a situation. Like, if you see somebody doing well in business, or, you see maybe somebody like, and maybe I would perhaps fall into this category like of like more of a kind of leaning towards a lifestyle kind of business, work from home. I see my daughter all the time, spend loads of time with my wife. Like, I've got that kind of balance, if you like. And it'd be easy to be like, oh, that must be nice, but then you don't really look at like what it's taken to actually get there. And that's not me trying to make it I've had some like heroic journey. It's just like, if you actually looked at what it took to get there, you'd actually see that you could probably do the same thing. That's what's even like more frustrating about it. It's like, if
it should be inspiring.
I'm not suggesting you should take inspiration from me, but there's plenty of people to take inspiration from. But if you've got that, must be nice, then I just think you're overlooking so many potential. Because like the best proof you can get in life is from other people. Again, we're social creatures. You should be looking at other people, especially people around you that are maybe closer to you, even in terms of like geography. Like that's actually a big thing, because it's easy if you look at people that say like, you see this really successful guy, but he's based in America, then you can be like, well, it's different culture, different society, different opportunities, and you can easily explain it away. But if you're seeing a guy and he's from, 50 miles down the road, you're like, well, all right, okay, that guy's doing okay. Like the guy that got me into copywriting was Mike Samuels, who's been on here, hasn't he?
Yeah, twice, yeah.
Mike is from Southampton. And up until that point, I'd only ever really seen copywriters from America and stuff. And then I saw Mike, and I was like, oh, Mike used to be a personal trainer. I was a personal trainer at the time, wanted to get into copywriting. He got into copywriting, built a good career, and I was like, well, I'm going to give this guy money and learn from him. You know, I'm just going to absorb whatever, and it turned out really well. So I think having that must be nice. I could easily have said like, oh, it must be nice living in Southampton. It's a wealthy area. They've got lots of clients. People get disposed. You see, it's so easy to do that, and you're just selling yourself short every single time.
That easy choice would be the wrong choice because it would lead to a hard life. Whereas you took the slightly harder choice to err on the side of positivity and inspiration and be like, oh, let me learn from this guy. And I guess just to wrap up that whole negative self-talk piece, if you go into a venture or if you go into an opportunity with that, like, I've never done this before, I'll never do this, then you never will. Yeah. And a recent episode with Nico Carrillo, he sat there and he said, I will be one championship champion. I will do this. Not I can. He just keeps saying that. And somebody actually sent me a message during the week saying that Nico was speaking about quitting his before his trades test as an electrician. And he said, there was no plan B, no plan C, there was plan A, and it only fall forward. And so somebody with that level of like strength of language, no wonder he goes on to get to the level he's got to, because he just continually backs himself from a positive perspective, whereas he could easily let doubts come in and be like, I might be able to make money from Muay Thai. He's like, I will make a career at Muay Thai. I will retire my fiance, now wife, and be able to fend for her and provide for her. And I think switching that negative to positive self-talk far more often just increases our surface area of luck of what we're pursuing going well.
Oh, 100%. And I always, whenever I give an opinion and things, I would like to kind of acknowledge, not my privilege, but my traits. I have never been a jealous person. And I understand, like, sometimes jealousy is something that people are maybe just more inclined towards. I know it's an ugly trait, whatever, but, you know, it's where you're sometimes just in your makeup. I can never recall a time of being, like, jealous of somebody. I certainly, as an adult, can't even remember it as a teenager. But, like, so I imagine it may be more difficult if you're maybe more prone to being jealous of people, and that you probably have to work a bit harder to overcome that. But just in my personal experience, whenever I've came across somebody, and listen, I have generally had times where I have probably had a bit more negative self-talk, you know, like when I was trying to find my way in terms of like my career and things, I've probably had more negative self-talk than was healthy. But I've never had the side of things where it manifested in terms of like jealousy of other people or negative self-talk towards other people, to the extent that I wasn't able to have the perspective to be like, well, maybe I could actually learn something from this guy or this girl, because they're obviously doing a lot better than me, so they must be doing something right. So yeah, I imagine that might be a bit more difficult if you're maybe more prone towards jealousy. I
certainly think so, but it's recognising those character traits and pushing back against them when we can.
Yeah, you can't just use, oh, it's just my nature. Like, well, do something about it, you know.
Definitely. Let's give a green flag, Chris. So the first one for you for brain.
Yeah, I said it's being able to entertain two competing thoughts at the same time. I think somebody said somebody said that was the sign of intelligence, the ultimate sign of intelligence. I can't remember who said that. I want to say George Orwell, but I could be wrong. That may be just because I've seen 1984 on the bookshelf behind us. That might be why I'm saying that. But anyway, so yeah, I think that's a big green flag when you can, you know, you're not an absolutist. And I know, like, context has almost been memed out of existence, because I understand, like, you know, the trend of context in every single conversation just leads to nothing being said.
That's right. We could go for 2 hours and never get anywhere.
Being made. You do have to commit to a decision or an opinion or whatever it is eventually. But I think that if you're able to hold two competing thoughts in your head that appear to be at opposite ends of the spectrum, and you can actually maybe see that what you can take from both, or how they interact with each other, or even the trends between the two, that probably shows that, you know, yes, a big green flag.
You're a reasonable thinker.
I would say so, yeah. You can reason your way through things. You can think through, like, from first principles. You can break things down a little bit more. You can take different viewpoints. And, like, this isn't just about, like, political or cultural or social things. It's anything at all. Like, you know, in my line of work in copywriting, a lot of people talk about sending daily emails. Some people, you know, only email once a week. It's like, well, let's look at it from both perspectives. Let's look at the pros and the cons and weigh up and come to whatever the consensus is for what your desired outcome is. You know, so again, it also shows that you've probably got, if we're talking about practical things like that, it probably shows that you've also got a good idea of what your desired end goal is. So you know the direction you're heading in, and you're going to come across lots of competing ways to get there, and you're going to have to then be like, okay, well, I need to actually hold the two of these in my head. I can't just outright reject them, because they've clearly worked for multiple people. So let's take a ride with them both and see where I arrive at,
Absolutely. And I think that willingness to respect both sides of an argument allows you to be more able to change your opinion without you suddenly looking like a turncoat to the one side that you've maybe favoured before. And a concept that I quite like is almost steel manning the opposite side's argument and being like, okay, well, I think that counting your macros is the best way to lose weight. But my friend over here has done carnivore, doesn't count any of his calories, but he's got in great shape. There must be something to that.
Yeah.
And like steel manning, like, okay, well, what is it? He's cut out ultra processed food. He's only eating once a day. So he probably is in a calorie deficit and the quality of his nutrition is better. I just happen to think that weighing out your food and having a good idea of what you're putting in your body is a more optimal approach, but I understand that approach might work well for somebody else, and I'm not necessarily just being like, oh, nonsense, bullshit, like pseudoscience, whatever, that people would immediately scream, and almost like steel manning the pros of their argument to be like, okay, well, I can actually see how that might work. In the same way, daily email versus weekly email, you're like, well, it depends on what you want to get towards and how fast and in what way, depending on what we're going to do and which option we take.
Exactly. And also, like, to go back to the kind of personal awareness we mentioned earlier, like, it also probably factors in that little bit of like, that personal awareness of like, well, what is best for me? Like, again, just to keep the daily email example, are you going to send an email every day? Can you do that? Do you have the skills? Do you have the time? Do you have the patience? Like, can you, like, I mean, because it's got to be a good email. Can't be a shitter. If you're going to email somebody every day, it better be good. So like, do you have that in your locker? Yes or no? And you can, and for a lot of people, they'll be like, oh, do you know what? Probably not. Or maybe you say, not right now. But I think I would like to get there, because in my end vision of how I want to run my business, I'd love to wake up every day, write a really good email for my audience, do 2 or 3 hours of client work, and then have the rest of my day to myself. I'm like, okay, well, that's a good idea to work towards daily. So you see how we can actually have a little bit of like personal perspective and understand what your strengths and weaknesses are within the context of holding 2 ideas, and then lean to, because and again, you go a layer deeper and you're like, well, I know this might not play to my strengths, but these are things I want to get stronger in, so I maybe need to upskill or invest in something that's going to allow me to have the skills to take this road, because working with these 2 different ideas, like again, a daily email example, I probably need to get better at copywriting, so I should probably invest in my copywriting skills if that's what I want to get to. So it can actually lead you to a decision fairly quickly as well. It's not as if you're sitting there, like some Greek philosopher, like, let's you can actually go through these ideas fairly quickly. Just rejecting one or the other outright, I just don't think it's so simple, isn't it? It's very, very simple. And I always, again, not to turn a green flag into a red flag, but I think the opposite, when somebody's an absolutist and they're just clearly like labeling things
one size
from the
fits all.
get-go, I'm like, okay, you're obviously a bit of a cement head. You don't really know what's going on here.
Podcast klaxon. I'm going to mention Gary Stevenson versus Daniel Priestley, which I think everyone's commented on. I think that showed somebody like Daniel who was able to...
Do you know he was the most successful trader at HSBC? He's never... I think it's not really well known. He doesn't mention it very much,
Big Gary. Do you think he's an industry plant?
I don't know, man. I think he's a tit. That's what I think he is. Like, do you know what really, not to go on a tangent, do you know what really annoys me about him is anybody that takes hope and ambition away from people and makes them feel completely hopeless and helpless in this world. And I just cannot abide people like that, especially when you're in a position where you've been successful.
From a disadvantaged start, climbed the ladder, and then pulled the ladder up from behind him and said, no, you can't climb it because the system's rigged. Nonsense.
I know. And look, he probably does have good points in amongst his message, but it's just so hard when he just completely like puts people down. I imagine if, again, I've never been from that world, but like, imagine if you're from that world and you're maybe trying to make something of yourself. And look, it doesn't mean that you're going to be the top trader at HSBC. You're just trying to make a better life for yourself than the situation you've been born into, doing whatever it is, whether you're pursuing a career in the arts or a trade, or you're trying to get into university or sport, and you just get this guy sitting on this millionaire sitting on a podcast in his Adidas trackies because he's a man of the people, isn't he?
That's what makes me think he's a plant. It's like it's like a costume.
Yeah. It's just when I actually listen, he's got quite a good delivery. The rhythm, the way he talks. He's a great
speaker.
Then when you actually listen to him, I'm like, you didn't say anything there. You didn't say anything there. Like, that was completely devoid of any substance. So, yeah, slight tangent there, but yeah, just the absolute worst.
what Daniel demonstrated in that debate with him was that Daniel could hold two competing ideas of how Gary thought and how he thought, and acknowledge the things that Gary was saying that he agreed with about wealth inequality, about expanding inequality, which many of us agree with, about
100%.
maybe large multinational corporations not paying their fair share of tax, about particular people holding assets and benefiting from that over a period of time, but also holding up his positive ideas for how things should work. So I think Daniel demonstrated that he was a really reasonable thinker, and the green flag for his brain was that he could listen and understand and appreciate the points of virtue that Gary made, albeit they were limited, while still putting forward his case with confidence. Whereas on the for a red flag, Gary was an ideologue. He's got one view of things, and that's that. And if you disagree, he would call you a cement head.
Yeah, he would. I mean, I think that's a really good example, of what we just said there. Like, one guy able to hold two thoughts in his head, give his own personal perspective, concede some ground that perhaps would be viewed as harming his point of view. And come to a really, I would say, a very kind of profound opinion, that was layered, and that gave a lot of helpful advice, actionable advice, but also really gave some kind of hard facts as well. And then somebody that just sat there like a parrot and just repeated the same message, packaged ever so slightly differently. And it's so easy for that type of message to catch on as well, because it's negative, it's tribal, it's us versus them. So it's very easy. Zero-sum game as well, isn't it? Totally. Yeah, the whole reason that you're in the situation is because of them over there. And then it's so easy just to flick that into people just hating an entire group of people. And feeling hopeless. I've never felt hopeless, but the more I think about it, I just think that must be one of the worst feelings in the world. I'm no expert on this, but I just feel like people who are hopeless must be in a truly, truly rough place. I imagine if you're somebody that perhaps struggles, say with even your mental health or, things like that, I imagine hopelessness is one of those feelings that just takes you to probably the darkest of places.
Despair. Despair's probably one of the worst.
And, if you can look throughout history for countless examples of people who felt hopeless, and it never ends well.
Absolutely. So let's move on to a green flag for me this time, and that's to do with making sure that your brain health and your mental health is great. I believe that if you have an identity and a view of yourself that is in alignment with your habits, routines, and behaviors, you're gonna live a much healthier, happier lifestyle. Because on the flip side, if you have an idealized version of yourself and your day-to-day week life, how you spend your time is out of alignment with that, I believe that delta is actually a big reason for the challenges that we have around mental health, and particularly young men. Because if you have this idealized version where you're smashing it in the gym, smashing it in your job, or starting a business, maybe with a beautiful partner, and your day-to-day life is clocking into a 9 to 5 that you hate, watching tons of porn and vaping and drinking and escaping from that perspective, of course how you live is out of alignment with who you say you are, who you hold yourself up as. So I believe that always having this version of yourself that you want to be, and then figuring out what would that guy do, how would he behave, how would he hold himself, and getting that as close as possible to what your reality is where we feel our most content, but also our most purposeful and progressive too.
No, I completely agree. But I think what you're saying there about, having an idea of who you want to be, how you want to live your life, I think because there's so much content, short form, medium form, long form, everything, you can almost live vicariously through that content. And then you actually, on a biological level somewhere, you think you're living that guy's life. You think you're living the life that you aspire to, because you're just you're just consuming so much of it through your phone and podcasts and scrolling on your feed, because you follow lots of different people who are very successful and have material success and the things that you want. And I think that probably stunts your action in some ways, ironically, because like I said, you've not actually taken the time to think about because you're seeing the end, aren't you? You're seeing the end result. It's quite difficult there's not as much content about the journey and things like that, and the qualities and decisions, and so that's a bit hard for you to map out. But you can escape down a doom scroll and you're seeing guys driving nice cars, or whatever your thing is. But then it comes down to it and you're just oh, right, this is actually quite hard work. And like I said, then you're escaping into, your weekends are distractions, blowouts and distractions and things. And then you wake up on Monday and you're hamster wheel again, sort of thing, And But yeah, I completely agree. I agree. If you can find ways to line up, even just start really, really small with, even if you just start with, and I know again it's been memed out of existence, even if you start with, well, what would this guy do in the morning? What would he do in the morning? He probably wouldn't hit snooze seven times and run out the door with his tie half on and a slice of toast hanging out his mouth and sprint sweaty into the office, barely clocking in on time. That's probably what he wouldn't do. You know, you don't have to go as far as having a 75-step morning routine, but you could probably get up a bit earlier, maybe get a workout in, maybe read a few pages of a book, maybe just, you know, start the day on
You're
a good
starting
foot.
to join the dots
Maybe do
between
something like that.
the type of guy you want to be and the type of things that person would do.
Yeah.
And I've spoken about this in a few different podcasts when I've been a guest about when I moved role from the insurance industry into the furniture industry to kind of pursue bigger deals and try and do things on a bigger level. I was told, Colin, you can earn 6 figures here as long as you deliver 7 figures of revenue for the business on an annual basis. So I was like, right, cool. So I want to be a 6-figure sales guy delivering 7 figures of revenue. So I had to work back from there. How many calls would he make? How many emails would he send? What kind of content would he post on his LinkedIn? How would he handle himself in a discovery meeting? How would he follow up on a proposal? How would he close with a big client he was wanting to win? What sort of deals would he be working on? What would his product knowledge be like? And then day to day, I just started trying to join the dots between this guy that I was trying to be and the guy that I was at that moment in time by almost mimicking those behaviors. And in the same way, long before the podcast had the whole top 1% in the world stat from Listen Notes, or it had, 300 odd episodes and 655-star reviews on Spotify, which is amazing. It feels great. I had to act like that podcast host before then. So I had to reach out to the type of guest that I wanted to get on. I had to schedule it in professionally. I had to do my research and ask good questions. I had to produce clips.
Which probably got you some criticism. Sorry to interject.
Oh, big time.
But how many people, especially in this neck of the woods, fucking Cambro, thinks he's a ticket. Look at him. You know what I mean? That's going to attract that type of, you know.
It did in the early days.
Yeah, I bet it did.
Do you know in the early days? I said this on the Scottish Property Podcast when I went on as a guest there, and a lot of new listeners came across from that because I was quite fired up in that episode. But in the first year of Cambro, the vast majority of my audience, for on a per capita basis, like per 1,000 basis, were in England rather than Scotland, because people up here were like, "Who do you think you are?" Whereas people down south were like, "Oh, cool, that's cool." Like, I've listened to him as a guest on one of the guys down there's podcast, and I quite enjoyed them. They came across, and it took me a while to build more of a Scottish audience because I had to prove myself first. Who do you think you are? Billy Big Balls, thinking he's the ticket, thinking he's the man. So all those habits and routines that I had as a podcaster in terms of the quality of the thumbnail, the quality of the clips, they were all me acting like a future version of the podcast host that I wanted to be. And I was just trying to join those dots, and I hope that's a helpful example for people when it comes to the sales side of things and the podcast side of things. And if I picture you when you moved into copywriting, you had a uniform that you would write your copy in after you'd finish your PT sessions. You had probably a particular workflow that was like, this is what a full-time copywriter would do. And you start to act like that guy before you become that guy, and it gives you a better chance of actually getting
100%. Also, I had the benefit of doing that in private. I wasn't doing it in a public platform like you were, and like many other people that want to achieve something might have to do, whether if their business involves posting on social media and things like that, you're just going to have to accept the fact that you're just going to have half-wits that are probably going to try to have a bit of a swipe at you. But I actually put this question, this is kind of question that I've kind of asked myself a few times in my journaling and things, and it's something I said to, I had a guy book in for a copywriting workshop last week, and I said to him, are you giving yourself a chance to be successful? And it's a yes or no question, because tell me yes or no, and then because you sit there and you think, you go, no, I'm not. And that's ultimately, generally speaking, when you ask that question, you're not doing the things that you should do. It's just a bit of a reset. I just like it because it's snappy. It instantly puts things into sharp focus for you, and you can be like, well, do you know what? So if you're a copywriter and you're not getting clients, I'm like, well, you're giving yourself a chance to be successful. How many pitches have you sent? 1. How many follow-ups have you sent to that pitch? None. That's why you don't have any clients.
Ask yourself, what would a successful copywriter be doing, and try and mimic those behaviors.
Yeah. Because it's not hard to, take an educated guess at what those things would be. That's the thing. Don't think when did they kind of, it's a bit of the mid-wit curve. My whole life is now the mid-wit curve. That's just how I think about so many things.
Explain that for those that are uninitiated.
So it's on one end you've got a guy. So it's like, if to take the copywriting example, on one end of the curve, you'll have somebody and he's just like giving a really simplistic approach to something like, if I want to get copywriting clients, I should just send emails to people that I really want to work with and I know I can do good work with. And then halfway up the curve, it's like, I need to have 7,500 cold email campaigns going out to different segments of different sectors, and it's this big, massive, long explanation. And in the far end of the curve, you come back to just send pitches to people that you know you can do good work for. And you've got to go, and you can apply that to any industry.
The fitness one's the big one, isn't it? And we'll get onto that when we talk about body.
Yeah, we'll get onto that. But yeah, I just think that question just allows you to have that nice refresh and reset. And again, to go back to your kind of green flag, it really helps you realign with those habits and behaviours, because what it actually really takes to get what you want, you probably already know. And I think, like, for me, when I was trying to make it with copywriting, once I got inside the rooms and spoke to the people who were successful, it was a really kind of, I was like, oh, there is no secret. And I know that's a cliche, but trust me, if you are at that point where you're trying to make it somewhere, you've got to realise, like, see the things that you think you should be doing, you're probably 80% right. You probably should be speaking to more people, making more connections, pitching more, selling more, all of these, put yourself in more rooms where you can get more opportunities. There isn't a secret method that's been, it's been safeguarded by people who have made it. It's not there,
Let's jump onto body for a little bit, Chris, and let's go to your first red flag down there.
This is going okay. Okay. So my first red flag is being a fragilista.
And what do we mean by that?
So if anybody knows Nassim Taleb, if anybody's read his work, then congratulations, because that is hard going. But very intelligent guy.
But you've done it for the listeners, so they don't have to.
Yes, I have. Well, I'm going to butcher his work, and he's not shy about telling people. His favourite thing to do on Twitter is tell people to fuck off. So you might get a comment from underneath this telling me to fuck off. But basically, being a fragilista with your body is more about, like, when you get these people that get really neurotic about certain exercises or moving your body a certain way. I just think, like, because they attach all these negative outcomes to it, all these dangers, like, oh, you should never back squat because it'll compress your spine and it'll blow out your knees, and when you're 70 years old, you'll be a cripple. And you're like, man, like, see the worry that you have, the neuroticism that you have from all of these things that you're afraid of doing, far outweigh the amount of stress that puts on your body, far outweighs the potential risk of actually just doing the things, And I always, like, I used to be a coach. I've always been into fitness. I'm a million miles away from any type of expert. But one thing I'm pretty confident in saying is the human body is one of the most adaptable organisms around. Whatever, you can just look at a good thing. You look at different sports and you look at how people adapt. Look at the positions that, like, wrestlers are absolute freak shows. I'm not talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin, right? Actually, like, don't want to annoy the wrestling crowd, Fucking hell. Need to ask him off for a bus fare to come and get date me a square go. But no, like, Olympic freestyle wrestlers, I've always, my mate, close to me when I was younger, he was a wrestler for Great Britain. So I've seen it kind of up close and personal, just how freakishly athletic these guys are. I think when you look at the positions that they get into, their knees facing one way, their ankles facing another way, they're twisted over, they've got another freakish athlete trying to rip them limb from limb. They're fine.
Yes, the human body can handle a lot more than we think.
Yeah, so much more. And I know, like, because I'm not a wrestler, I know you can say, oh yeah, well, that the principle I'm trying to get across here is they have adapted to those positions and those loads and those stresses on their body. So you can probably back squat. I think you'll be all right. You can probably bend your spine. That's a big one. You can probably bend it a little bit more than you think. It doesn't have to be this rigid straight line all the time. If you're going for a PB and a deadlift, it's maybe going to curve a little bit and you'll be all right. You'll be fine. And see, if you're not, injuries are part of the process.
Progress,
you're going to get injured. Anybody that's, even just like anybody that's lifted before, you can do everything the exact same and you do one rep and something goes pop or click or tear and you're like, what the hell happened there? It's just your time, man. That's the price of entry. So yeah, I just think, like, that neuroticism towards you, but you're limiting yourself. You're missing out on a lot.
It's like
from doing that.
Almost like a form Nazi where they're too strict or too adherent to, like, a particular dogma.
Yeah. And you know what? It always comes back to the really weird guys that wear, like, the toe shoes and, like, train with, like, a mace or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And-
Or
like a club or something,
again, I'm not
you
gonna
know?
like bash powerlifters too much, but it's like the powerlifting in the gym with the notepad and the belt and the stretching band and the release ball, and they
Aye.
do like one working set across like 3 hours.
Yeah.
And you're like, mate, see if you just like did a few sets of squats and like did some leg extension, you probably get quite strong and probably able to do more squats
Yeah.
than this like weird anal, like almost worship shrine thing that they create
Yeah.
around the squat rack, and
Oh,
then
man,
they
they're
do
for
like
4 hours, aren't they?
one, and you're like, mate, like you're competing at like amateur level in like the north of Scotland.
I know.
Don't take it. Don't do it like this. You need to maybe push your body a little bit more and not be so fragile.
Yeah, exactly. I used to, funny enough, I used to train at the same time as a guy who was a powerlifter, and he used to eat
Was this the milk guy?
Milky Bar yogurts. He used to eat
Oh.
Milky Bar yogurts in between his sets.
I'd be
and
unwell.
then go outside and smoke weed. Guy was an absolute. Do you know what? This will describe the guy perfectly. He's the type of guy that walks up the side of dual carriageways.
Oh, okay.
So now we all know who we're talking about.
Yeah.
We all know the guy when there's paths to take you to where you're going, and he's like, nah, dual carriageway for me, big guy. Whoof, straight line up there with my Milky Bar yogurts to the gym. Absolute freak show. But he was a bit of a fragilista, to be fair. But yeah, I just think like you're missing out on a lot. I think you know, getting worried about getting your joints at certain angles or putting load under certain movements, like the whole, to come back to the whole kind of bed in your spine thing, like have you seen people doing loaded Jefferson curls? They've obviously built up to it, but it's like your spine can bend and roll and twist. Like,
And it puts you in a better position long term.
of course it does. It makes you more robust. That's the opposite of being, you know, it seemed to Les book's called anti-fragile. You want to be anti-fragile, so you want to be robust to you know, certain impacts and stresses and loads. I think it would benefit so many more people. You get to explore more training options. I wish I did more of that type of thing when I was playing rugby and things, you know, to get myself into different positions and under stress and under load. So yeah, don't be a fragilista.
Don't be a fragilista. If you're new to the podcast, make sure you've hit the subscribe or the follow button on whatever platform you're listening on, so I can keep getting fantastic guests just like this one. My red flag for body we'll start off with is all the gear, no idea. So Whoop Band, Apple Watch, the
Anavar.
newest, the newest Vaporfly running shoes, a running vest, but not training with any intent.
Yeah.
And it's similar to what we spoke about, maybe the powerlifter that spends 3 hours
Yep.
in the one squat rack doing 2 or 3 sets. On the other side of actually working hard with your body, you will see the results, not necessarily being amazingly kitted out or having the most strategically programmed program. It's with the actual hard work and the overload of time getting better at that is what's going to get you the results. And with the podcast we did with Alex and David about getting jacked and lean ahead of the 12-week peak,
Right, yeah.
they were joking about, like, you sometimes go in the gym and the guy's got absolutely horror form, but he's been training for a decade and he just trains really hard. So he's absolutely jacked out his mind. And everyone goes into the gym and sees that. The guy that like half reps the bench press, but got like a rippling chest, you're like, he's trained for like 10 years, really, really hard, goes to failure all the time, eats a lot of protein. Pretty simple. On the mid-work curve, he's just eats lots of protein, trains hard, even if the form's not perfect. He maybe isn't wearing like the latest Apple Watch or the Whoop to tell him that his strain was 13% today, but he shouldn't train hard. He's just gone in and bashed it because that's what I always do on a Monday. And I think for me, it's a real red flag if you're too busy optimizing for the minutia rather than like doing the big like lever moving, dial moving activities that move you in the right direction, like training hard regularly, eating well, sleeping.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's like the guy that all, you know, the boys that you always used to turn up to rugby training, they always have like the brand new like super rugby tops on, or the brand new Glasgow Warriors top, like full kit wankers at training,
Yeah,
and like
stick
they
mitts.
and they would just be the absolute worst player every single time. Like hands like cow's tits, couldn't do anything, man, couldn't tackle nothing. It's like those type of guys. I just think like
I'm sure there's guys that do that like five aside as well at football.
Oh,
They'll turn
mate.
up like all the gear.
no. This is the best 5-a-side example of that, right? It's ultra specific. I went to school with a guy who used to turn up at 5-a-sides with a captain's armband.
Chris, you upset a lot of people last time in the podcast. Hopefully these captain's armband wearers don't come for us this time.
Ah, no, well, I mean, if there's more than one of them, then
We've got a problem.
Then we need to round them up and have a word.
Deportations now.
Because you cannot be wearing a captain's armband to 5-a-sides. He was playing 5-a-sides with his dad and his dad's mates, and he rocked up with a captain's armband on. Horrific behaviour. All the gear, no idea. But to go back to you, yeah, I think like see with fitness, I think like I know the wearables have become a thing more recently, and I think like I remember reading a book years ago by Andy Galpin, Dr. Andy Galpin and Brian McKenzie. It's called Unplugged, and it had a really big effect on me because by the way, I wouldn't say I was all the gear, no idea, but similarly, I remember when I first started trying to get into like powerlifting and things, I remember looking at squat warm-ups to increase my squat. A warm-up's not going to increase your squat. Like squatting more is going to increase your squat. I should have been looking at, but I was looking for the easier way out. I'm like, oh, maybe if I do this magical warm-up, my limbs will all be nice and greased up and loose, and I'll be able to drop into the hole and squat 180. You're like, no, that's never going to that's not going to happen. And I think a similar thing with like, there's so much data with these wearables and stuff now, and I think like if you're buying into it all and like, oh, my whoopsies, I can't train today. I'm like, well, how do you actually feel? Do you feel okay to train? Could you go in and do your first set and be like, I feel all right. Yeah, I'll be able to handle a session. Could you do like a quick top single to see how you handle that? Maybe 80-85% and then say, yeah, I'm good to go. I just think like if you're going down that road of having like all the gear for everything, you aren't putting the energy into
where it matters.
Where it truly matters. And I know there's plenty of guys out there that will have all the gear and that will train hard, but yeah.
There's too many people nowadays. Like if I look around my David Lloyd, which you would imagine is one of the testing grounds for this particular all the gear, no idea phrase.
Yeah.
They're just not pushing themselves.
Yep.
And you're like I don't like. Again, I love data. Like my brother wears a whoop and he swears by the data he gets from it, and Ian's in good shape. So it's like it's
absolutely,
like so it's kind of he laughs that there's people there that are like checking their stats or like, oh, I've gone for a 20-minute sauna rather than like a 25-minute sauna because it's better for me. And you're like, mate, you did like 3 sets of 10 at like RPE 4. So don't worry about how long you saunaed for. Like what you need to do is create some training stimulus and actually go hard. So my red flag for body that starts off is absolutely around, don't be caught up in like the latest like gear or fitness trend that you can acquire and jump on. Instead, just like apply yourself hard in what you've chosen to do. Yeah.
Again, it comes back to that mid-bit curve, man. Just get back, just you all the way through it, and then you get back to, I should probably just train hard. That's probably what I should do, and I'll probably get a lot further than, obsessing over all these little details. Oh, is my volume right? Is my intensity right? Like, actually, I should probably be, shut up, man. Just go and lift something heavy for a lot of reps, in a session, and just push yourself.
Rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Chris, give us your green flag for body to start us.
My green flag for body. The next one is finding, quite tied into what you're saying, actually, like find movements that allow you to train hard. So don't be married to like specific movements, because end of the day, like you're not, unless you're a competitive like power lifter or Olympic lifter, you're just trying to achieve certain movement patterns, aren't you? And like when I was a coach, I used to coach a lot of rugby players. Had a few boys that like played second row, so you're talking like 6'6", 6'7", taller lads. And it's like, well, you know what? I'm just going to give you a trap bar deadlift, like in the high handles. That's fine for you. You can lift a lot of weight. You can shift it. It's a little less taxing on your spine. You're in a good shape. I mean, I don't think it's very limiting again to get caught up in these like made up rules, like or you're not allowed to elevate your heels during a squat. Like, what if that makes it easier for you to squat?
You're not allowed to wear lifting shoes, for example.
No, lifting shoes, and then and you have all these like mobility warriors coming like, oh, we need to work your ankle mobility. I'm like, okay, do you want to work on your ankle mobility? Do you want to spend 10 minutes doing ankle mobility drills, or do you want to put on a pair of shoes or put a wedge under you and hit a squat pattern, no problem, pretty comfortably? I know what the majority of people want to do, because mobility work bores the tits off you. It is the most unrewarding, unsatisfying, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. If you want to do it, go ahead. But I just find there's probably ways you can work around if you do have certain limitations. And then also, you can probably rinse movements for a lot more than you are. Rather than cycling in new movements every 4 to 6 weeks, just take a movement as far as you can. Like, if you're feeling it on bench and you're going up and up in your rep ranges and your weight, don't stop. Keep going. Ride that gravy train all the fucking
I need to
way,
switch
man.
it to incline because that's the periodization nonsense. Keep going.
Exactly. Like, I mean, I've actually literally just started back squatting again for the first time in like 2 or 3 years. After a lot of Zercher squatting and front squatting and stuff.
Yeah.
And I do find like, I've got squat shoes on, got some knee sleeves. I find I can just, for whatever reason, I used to always struggle with back squats, but now I'm just in a groove and I've got a really solid technique and I can just really crank out some really quality reps at high loads. I'm like, I'm going to keep going until the wheels fall off. You've
found a movement that allows you to work hard and push the intensity and rinse and repeat.
What more do you need?
If, for example, that turned out to be a goblet squat, so be it.
Yeah.
If it turned out to be a barbell or a Bulgarian split squat, crack on with that as well. But find movements that favour your anatomy, favour your form and like mobility, and just crack on.
Exactly. Like, I can't do any type of behind the neck press. I'm not too great overhead press because last season at rugby, dislocated my shoulder, tore my rotator cuff in the one go. So
for your delts, what are you doing then?
So my delts, I'm just doing a lot of lateral raises, basically. Lot of laterals. That's pretty much it, really. And then I do incline press and flat bench.
And that stimulates enough of the front delt.
And that stimulates plenty, you know. And like, my shoulders have always been, and find this out at the 12-week peak because Alex and David told me my shoulders are my kind of strength of my like physique, if you want to talk about aesthetically.
They're more capped and they're wider.
I don't really need to do a lot of direct shoulder work in that regard. But yeah, I just think like find the things that. But if I do want to do direct shoulder work, it's lateral raises because I can lock in. I can get, I can really kind of just focus on working hard. I'm not worried about like doesn't feel right. You know, you don't want to be thinking about those things when you're balls deep in a set. You just want your music blaring and you just want to get out high quality reps and get to the end of the set and be wobbling and be a bit like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to get this. I think that's probably good advice for the majority of people.
One of the green flags I was going to do, but I've changed it, was because you submitted that one, was doing less but better. And this links exactly into that. So like that kind of quality and intensity over junk volume. So in an ideal world, somebody would say to you, oh, Chris, for your shoulders, you're going to do 3 sets of a press or 2 sets of a press, 3 sets of a lateral and 3 sets of a reverse fly. But that's like cookie cutter.
Yeah.
So you've just decided like, actually scrap the junk volume. I'm just going to be really intense in my lateral raises and my delts look cracking. Thank you very much. Yeah. And it's doing less but better. Finding those movements that work for you, doing a couple of sets of them really, really hard rather than doing like loads and loads of fluffy sets on movements that maybe you can't connect with.
Yeah, and like see the other thing on that is like I know like recently because I've still got I've got a lot of clients in the fitness industry, so I've got to keep back in a finger on the pulse on the trends and things. There's an emerging trend between like the low volume crowd and who and then like the high volume crowd, which would be more like your kind of Micah Rattel, like deep stretch, hypertrophy, 4 sets of 12, all that kind of stuff. And then guys that are doing, I'm going to do 1 set of 3 reps for chest per week, right? But like I think like you got to look at it practically. Like see for me, I run a business, I've got a young daughter, a wife, got a life I want to live. I want to be in the gym for no longer than 45 minutes. And I've got a gym in my house, so it's very easy for me to train. I want to be in the gym lifting weights 3 times a week for 45 minutes. So I think, honestly, starting from that, sometimes taking the practical approach and looking at how it informs, it gives you the constraints you need to pick right, okay, so now I know I'm in here for 45 minutes and then I'm out here because I need to get showered, eat something, back to work. I can't do what you just said for shoulders because I've got 1 set. I've got 1 exercise for shoulders. So I'm going to do the one that allows me to lift the most weight for the most reps.
Bang for your buck.
Bang for my buck. That is what informs so much of my training. And it might not be up to date with the latest, scientific hypertrophy study or strength study, but it works for me. I'm making gains. I'm enjoying it. So probably that attitude is going to take you a lot further than if you grab some plan that was optimal for hypertrophy.
Totally agree. So the green flag that I replaced doing less but better with was strategic use of supplements at proper dosages.
Oh.
It's so attractive for us to just supplement absolutely everything and anything, particularly as like crazes come round. And I've had a supplement routine for the best part of 15 years.
Yeah.
You've taken many supplements over the years as well,
I have,
dabbled,
yes.
experimented.
Right.
But when we found supplements that actually work at science-backed dosages, that is when you actually see the benefit of them. 100%. So if we hark back to the C19 period, a lot of people realised that the UK is very deficient in vitamin D.
Yep.
So vitamin D became the hype thing to everyone buy it. But so many vitamin D supplements are nowhere near the IU in terms of the measurement that you actually need to have an effect. So people are like, oh, I'm going to use vitamin D because it'll make me healthier, my immune system will be better, I'll feel better. But they're supplementing with the incorrect dosage. So they think they're being strategic, but they're not actually using something that's going to actually move the game forward. And we speak about Tonka Ali, I think, every podcast that we do, but having recently worked with Pure Sport for the last 6 months and on a number of the episodes, I started using their Tonka Ali. And their Tonka is actually it's efficaciously dosed.
Yeah.
And I had somebody like, I think 2 or 3 listeners messaged me in the last few weeks being like, oh, I've been using this one off like TikTok Shop and it's got like 200 meg in it versus the 400 that Andrew Huberman says is what we need. And we're going to go with Huberman on this one, right? I honestly think that it's so easy to like pick up a supplement and think that you're doing the right thing, but you need to go a little bit of a layer deeper about what does that supplement actually do? Why do I need it? Why do I want it? And is it actually at the right dose for me to get a benefit from this, or am I just taking something that I'm hoping is going to do well?
Yeah, 100%. Again, I think like to hark back what we said earlier, like start with the end in mind. Like, what is it you're actually looking to trying to achieve with a supplement? You know, so like my supplement, I've had a supplement regimen like yourself, Colin, but like I've experimented a lot over the years. Like, kind of been a bit. The thing is, I'm always willing to like test those things out. I'm like, you know what? If I take it and I feel a difference, that's good. I always like the risk and reward's fine for me. It's not. I'm not going to end up in hospital taking taking a supplement. So I've tried a lot of different things, like from nootropics to ones that are related to
more
testosterone, more health based and things like that. And now I've got a regimen that's pretty set and solid. Not to say other things won't come into it, but I always start with like, okay, well, what am I really trying to get from these supplements? And does this particular brand and this product have in it what I need to or not? Because it doesn't take long to research. That's the thing. See, with the amount of information out there now, it might feel overwhelmed, but it's actually quite simple just to distill it down.
We can cut through it. Find out who's a reputable brand, who's putting high quality ingredients into their supplements. Don't buy things off TikTok Shop. That's just a rule for supplements. I think that should be a rule. Yeah, don't do that. If a woman's walking on a treadmill trying to sell you a supplement, and that's what she does as a full-time job, what she's selling is probably dog shit.
Exactly. If the advert for it is a voiceover of some guy being like, oh my God, I can't believe that my testosterone is now, you're like, stay away from that. That's not good for you. So yeah, I think like, find like, you've got your solid ones, vitamin D, creatine. Although, do you know what I've done fairly recently in the past few months? I've been dosing with 10 grams of creatine rather than 5, basically doubled the dose. And I think
there's people experimenting with it even higher than that for cognitive, even beyond the strength gains.
Well, that's why I did it, and I've seen people talk.
Are you even smarter than before?
I wouldn't say that. No,
amazing news.
But I had I'd seen people say like 15, 20 grams and stuff like that, and I was like, But again, I looked at the people who were doing it, and these were like people on the extreme edge of biohacking, which is fine. Like they're the ones they're the soldiers in the front line figuring out stuff.
Let them crack on, yeah.
Crack on. So I thought, you know what, that's a bit much. So I've just doubled it to 10. I do genuinely like, 'cause I take it first thing in the morning along with L-theanine, and then I crack open a can of White Monster, and that's my kind of morning nootropic kind of stack, if you like. And it works really, really well.
The big controversy around creatine recently was the creatine gummies.
Oh yeah, all those companies have disappeared, haven't they?
That's right,
overnight.
because they were at it.
Yeah.
If something's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
So these tasty wee gummies that you thought had 3 or 5 grams of creatine in them, that's like none.
I done a post on this, right, and it got a lot of people angry, so I'll repeat it.
Yes.
Stop getting creatine from sweeties. You're an adult. Behave yourself. Do what everybody else does. Buy plain creatine, put diluting juice, or squash for the English listeners, in a shaker with some water, shake it up and down it first thing in the morning. That's been the way of creatine forevermore. And then you've got like, oh no, I want, a Wambar flavoured chew to get my creatine in. Like, grow up.
Gimps.
Grow up, man. Pathetic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just want to eat sweeties. That's all you want to do.
Yeah,
you
that's
just want to
right.
eat sweeties. And I love sweeties. I a kilo of pick and mix the day after the 12-week peak, right? Which would probably horrify some people, but I polished that off. No bother at all. When it comes to creatine, plain powder.
Take it as a powder.
Yeah, just take it as a powder.
Grow up.
Grow up, man.
Next red flag. Let's go for a business red flag, Chris.
Right, okay.
So open us up with, it's going to be good.
Copying others' marketing in funnels.
Where are you seeing this?
Everywhere. And I've seen it for that way when I was first getting into copywriting in the first couple of years, I was like, after 2 years, you kind of advance a little bit. You're a bit more strategic. Then you've seen enough funnels, seen enough sales, seen enough successful launches, failed launches. So you start to take on more of a different role with clients. And so many clients come and be like, I'm seeing this guy do this, so let's just buy his thing, download all the assets and go through the whole funnel, from the ad to the sales page, and then we'll just put our stuff on top of it. And you're just like, I have never seen it work, ever. And to be more specific about it, it's essentially when people look at the success of a certain marketing campaign and they think like, okay, well, they're in the same industry as me or a similar industry. I can just take that because it's proven. And all you're seeing is what's proven on the campaign level. This is the bigger mistake you make. You're probably looking at things like the ad copy, the creative, even like the design of the landing pages and things like that, which are all very, very important. But you don't have the same audience. You don't have the same level of trust. You don't have the same offer. You know, the offer is absolutely essential. Anybody that knows even the first thing about copywriting will tell you the absolute best copywriting in the world isn't going to sell. Like, you know, if I could write, like, you know, a sign for a food truck that was selling the finest quality Wagyu beef burgers known to man, and I drove that into a vegan food festival, that copy ain't selling shit.
Because the offer's not
there. It's not the right audience. It's not got that. Now, that's before anybody loses their mind. That's very reductive, but you get the point. You don't understand the offer and how it's been presented and made. So it's going to fail, you know? And it's just a very hacky way of trying to get yourself. And a good example, right, is the 12-week peak launch that we just did there. So I was the guy that did the marketing for it. And everybody spoke about the Anchorman VSL, you know, and it was very well received and everything. Like, you go ahead and try and rip that off. You'll get 2 sales if you're lucky. You won't, you know, it's just, it made sense for our audience, for the maturity of the offer, the 5th year. We wanted to make a big splash. There was a lot that wasn't just like decided on a whim, you know, but a lot of people maybe look at that and be like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to go do that for my business. And they don't always have bad intentions. They're just like, they just want to be successful. They see some successful marketing. Marketing's quite hard for a lot of people, you know, like once they get into creativity of it and all the different elements. And maybe they're not getting any likes in their posts and things like that. They're not getting the traffic that they want. So they just think, I'll just rip that off. And I would just really encourage you just to never ever do that, you know. It's just always going to end really, really badly.
Yeah. What would you encourage somebody to do that maybe is lost with their marketing then? And rather than maybe copying somebody that's a success in their industry, what could they do?
I think you can look, like we said earlier, you can certainly look for people for inspiration. I would maybe try to look a little bit deeper. So if it's somebody in your industry, now, our good friend David, who's normally here, he would give you the insights because he's not got a scarcity mindset. So if you're another coach and you reach out to David and you spoke to him about his marketing, he would tell you, he would break down how we've approached it over 5 years of working together. And I would do the same for you. If you reached out to me, I would break it down. But not everybody would, because some people are a bit more like, no, well, you're competition, so I'm not telling you. So I think like you could potentially reach out to people and ask them, like even offer to pay for their time to get more insights into what the offer is and how it was set up. Like, you know, like did this, because you might just see the end result, but you don't know, okay, well, I went out to an email list that's been emailed for 5 years, 4 times a week. You know, like there's more to this. I think another thing is like going back to like look at your offer. Does it now? I could talk about offers for about 4 hours. All I'll say is this is like a good way to kind of at least get started. Is this something that people want, or is this something that I think they maybe need right now? Because they're very different things. And I think if you look at your offer, David and MTN have always done a tremendous job of just delivering exactly what people want. I think we mentioned a podcast before.
The Positivity
Project. We went back. First thing me and David ever launched together was the Positivity Project. Again, it was during
height of lockdown.
Everybody's feeling a bit, and we get all these DMs and messages coming and being like, I feel a bit shite, feel a bit down, feel a bit. Positivity Project sold like hotcakes, sold like mad. We couldn't believe it because we'd never really launched in before. He was one of my first clients. We were like, oh my god, we just made $5,000 from this launch. What the hell? So yeah, I think like look at that and just look at if you've got if you're a service-based business, for example, and you are the face of the business, how much personality are you getting across in your marketing? How much of your opinions, you know, and your insights and your personal stories are you getting into your marketing? Because if all you're doing is regurgitating information, congratulations, you're a Google search or a ChatGPT search. I actually see the workshop I had the other day, this gave the guy, like, you know, you've probably had this before, Colin, you know when someone has a breakthrough on a call, you can see their eyes light up after something you said. So this happened to this guy. So maybe this will help some people. He was saying he was really struggling with the storytelling aspect. He had loads of stories to tell, but he just kept on sharing the same, like 3 tips for X. He was getting lots of saves and lots of kind of surface level interaction, but they weren't actually really converting because they were just seeing him as like a conveyor belt of information. They're just like, oh yeah, when I see his posts, I get a couple of tips for my bench press or whatever it is. And I just said one more to him. I said, it's all about scenarios. So if you can drop people into a scenario, that you can then take them from that scenario to sharing the information, to sharing the lesson or the insight, you have told a story. So like, for example, he was in the kind of the rugby performance niche. I said, right, okay, well, if you're going to talk about, he said a post about like, training hamstrings. And I said, okay, well, that's just information. Why don't you start with a story about making a line break in a game? Because that scenario, especially if you add sensory details to that scenario that your audience can relate
what
to.
What it felt like, what was happening.
Felt like, I caught the ball, the gap opened, I seen the gap between the two centres, I knew I was through, butterflies in my stomach. Anybody that's played rugby knows what I'm talking about right now. They're there, they've done that in a game before. They're like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. If you can drop those little sensory details in, that's just a little kind of added tip that can really bring more power and punch to a story. And then you're in that scenario, you've got people engaged because you've created like what kind of Matthew Dix calls this, like a movie in their mind. They are now making a line break, and like, don't worry about the specifics of the rugby example. Whatever the scenario is, like for yourself, Colin, if you're talking about like, I was waiting for, the Zoom call to load. It's my first big sales call at my new company. People are sitting in their head, sitting in front of their computer, waiting for the client to get on the call. So a simple way to do it, that's a very simple way to get more of your opinions and insights and stories over without thinking you need to be a master storyteller. Just think of all the scenarios that you have been in your life and drop people into it right away. So
yeah, great advice. So rather than copying other people's marketing funnels, let's build our insights and share them and use a scenario to paint the story for them.
Because that's the only thing that's unique about you. And I think I've said this a few times on this podcast and others, like that's the only thing that's unique about you and your service. Now, I understand your audience is a bit more diverse. You will have people who have genuinely unique businesses, with services and, softwares and things like that. But in more of the kind of coaching and services space, chances are there's thousands of other people that are offering a similar service. Okay, they might use a different app. They might, you might have slightly different opinions on the methods and things, but from the customer's point of view, you are the same. What makes you different is your experiences and your stories and your insights and your opinions, how you arrive, because you can arrive at telling people how important, protein is and fibre is 1,000 different ways from your stories and experiences. So it's just the only unique thing you have in your marketing, so use it,
Absolutely. My red flag for business, niche hopping constantly.
Oh, yeah.
We see it all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
David gives us an example. How many coaches suddenly went from fat loss to high rocks? How many people went, when the crypto market was down, went from crypto to AI or Web3? You give yourself no chance of really becoming an expert or having a level of mastery and authority in a space if you constantly hop between the different things that you're supposedly great at giving advice or coaching or support or even just working within. Again, within my space, I've worked with so many different salespeople who have moved around industries and never really built like a product knowledge. So they've been in insurance, they've been in furniture, they've been in software, they've been in whatever. And you're like, do you know anything about what you're selling? Now, there's congruent skills that we'll talk about in just a second that are applicable across many industries, but you also need to be credible to talk about the thing that you're going to be speaking about the most, which is the product and the after impact on your client of using your product or your service.
Yeah, totally. I think like you see it a lot again in kind of industries that I'm in, somebody's bio changes every 10 seconds. It's like, I genuinely remember seeing a guy who used to have in his bio that he coached it was basically aimed at middle-aged women who wanted to lose 10 to 15 pounds, and then I swear he was then coaching high-powered CEOs. No, that's a classic niche, that, isn't it?
Yep.
Do you even
busy
know?
Professionals?
I've
seen people coach them before.
We could talk about that as well. Jesus Christ, that's not a niche, by the way. Not a niche, because I am technically in that niche, and I see your marketing and it's shit. It doesn't speak to me. But yeah, it's a big red flag because it just shows that like either you're not sticking at something long enough to see any success, or this might sound harsher, or you're just not very good, and that's why. Which, by the way, we're all not very good when we first start. You need to put those reps in to get better.
That's why you mustn't hop.
But,
you must spend time in the niche to understand it. What are their pain points? What are the problems that you solve? How do you solve them? Have you got a track record of starting to solve them? Maybe for free at first. Maybe for a very low fee at first, and then you start to up your prices when you justify it. But sit within something for long enough to gain credibility.
Absolutely. I mean, like I always say, like MTN and Titan and Hybrid Performance. My first 3 clients had them on retainer within like 3 months of going full time into copywriting. But for a year before that, I was on Upwork getting paid like 10 pence for an email. Like basically freelancing on the side of being and like my work on there was awful, but I was getting paid like like I said, on it, I think I charged $50 for like a 7 email sequence for one person, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I can pretty much guarantee it was dog shit, But again, that was getting reps in, and I wasn't ripping anybody off. I was trying my hardest at the time. I didn't sandbag the emails. I just wasn't that good yet, so that's why I charged $50. But then when it came time to sign my retainer clients, I had those reps and I was able to deliver results for the level of skill I had at that time and actually see an impact in the business. So now, 5 years on, any coach that comes to me with an email list or anything like that, I know I can go in and I can have an impact. I can pull out offers. I can do all these things, but only because you kind of stick in at the niche.
And you work and you understand it deeply.
Yeah, of course. And do you not think, though, like, people that do that, I always question, like, do you not have any, like, kind of perspective on how this looks?
I thought you were going to say integrity.
Integrity? Maybe that's it. Maybe
Do you have no integrity?
Do you have no integrity? But you know that way, like, you do realise other people can see you niche shopping. Like, do you realise that? Like, and like, I'm not saying like you're top of mind for every single person, but like, if you're on socials or you're active online, like, people see like, oh, well, that was the guy that he was doing that niche 2 minutes ago, but now he's serving these people, and now he's serving somebody completely different again. He had an agency, but now he's got this, and now he's in AI, now he's in crypto. Like, do you not realise what that does to your credibility? It completely wrecks it, doesn't it?
Yeah, the concept I want to talk about, in sharp contrast to niche shopping, and kind of give people a way forward, is the concept of skill stacking from Scott Adams. This was actually mentioned to me on the last episode I did with Craig Ballantyne, who's just been on the show, and he was like, do you know Scott Adams? And I was like, yeah, I've definitely listened to him on a podcast before, and he was like, you basically aim to have congruent skills that complement each other. So Scott Adams is very unique. He's got drawing, which does cartoons,
Dilbert,
writing, business skills, work ethic, risk tolerance, and sense of humour. So he combines all of those. If I think about...
Very quickly on Scott Adams, he was one of the first people to go public and say that Donald Trump would win the 2016 election. He was like the earliest of early on calling that. It's very interesting. If you go back and look for his writings and his videos and stuff around that time, everybody was laughing at him, and he called it the day that Donald Trump came down the escalators at Trump Tower and announced his candidacy. Scott Adams said he would be president. Sorry.
Interesting. So he's a good judge of certain situations.
Well, yeah. He's a very clever guy. Very, very strong guy. Yeah.
So when I think about my skill stacking, I am somebody that, at this moment in time, I'm doing several different things. I'm a sales director with a big dirty £2 million target. I'm a sales coach, helping people and businesses to level up their sales and communication. And I'm a podcast host. Now, that means that I'm spread a little bit thin. However, all of the things that I apply across those three domains complement each other. Yeah. The ability to speak well, the ability to research well, the ability to outreach, the ability to run a discovery meeting or run a podcast, the ability to write down my thoughts and present them clearly as well. They're all complementary at that moment in time. So I'm not spread too thinly, and I'm not necessarily got a problem if I'm going between those niches that I'm spending my time in. Yeah. But there's many people that their thing that they're doing on the side or trying to build up is so unrelated to the thing that they're doing as their main thing that you're almost like you're spreading yourself too thin to actually ever achieve mastery. Whereas I think if you can have congruent skills and you can skill stack, then you start to be able to go like, oh, well, like, so for example, I moved from insurance sales to furniture sales. Now the sales process was very similar, but I just had much bigger opportunities, much bigger fish to catch. And I just was able to apply myself over and over and over again until I got success. I learned a bit about the product, and then guess what? I've moved niche, but I'm able to thrive in it. I think that's something that people got to consider. Can I move niche or adjust a little bit, but use existing skills to thrive in that new niche? Not necessarily go from crypto to AI or from fat loss. I'm suddenly the world's best high rocks coach. Yeah, absolutely. I think like you got to have an idea of what your kind of core set of skills are and define them. And a lot of times they come down to like, you know, like fundamental like principles almost. So like my fundamental skills that I always work on: storytelling, persuasion, sales, communication. Like these are all things that are going to impact my business, but also obviously I've started to put more time and effort, I was telling you before the podcast, into launching my own products and my own services now, not just working with clients. So they're going to, so again, like I'm not spread thin, they're right next door to each other, but I'm now doing like two things. You know, I'm trying to get my own kind of product service off the ground while still serving clients and bringing on new clients and launching new services within my agency. So I think like if you're able to define what your core skills are, then you can always stack them. And I think like, look, there's always going to be things that come along. Like I
I've been writing an AI newsletter for 37 issues now. I do AI workshops, AI and storytelling workshops. But like that's because it's not. I'm not an expert on AI. It's AI within the context of copyright. You know what I mean? It's within the context of copywriting because it's a new tool that you should be using.
And even to give an example of what you've done recently, you've done some ghostwriting on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
That is completely linked to copywriting and direct response. It just so happens to be a different format and how you're doing it. And that for me is a case of like, right, I've expanded my business's offering. I've got the AI workshops, I've got my coaching, I've got my client work, I've got ghostwriting on LinkedIn. And you're like, oh, I've just turned up in this space and guess what? I'm already really good at it because I've got all this other skills. So it's just, I would encourage listeners to think about what am I good at? And rather than like shifting completely 180 to something different, where can I apply it that maybe serves me better?
100%, yeah. Because like I say, why would you want to go somewhere and start from zero? That's just... You should remember what it was like to start from zero to get to where you are now with your current role and skill set and be like, well, don't do that again. You know?
Agreed. Chris, give me a green flag for business.
Green flag for business. Letting people do their job. And I put in brackets next to it, don't come into my Google Docs.
So you like working with people that allow you to focus on the thing they've assigned you to do or agreed that you have to do.
Why are we working together in the first place? I have a very narrow and niche set of skills that are going to help you achieve your outcomes in business. Let me do it. And I have to take complete ownership of that success or failure over my area, 100%. And this isn't, I mean, like my average client retention is like 3 years. So I'm not in any way difficult to work with. I just think like you can't, especially if you're in a role that's a bit more leaning towards creative, you can't have people coming in and being like, oh, actually, I would word it like this. And you know, like, well, you know, I appreciate that, but you don't know why it's worded like that. Like, there's a reason I've taken this angle or that angle. Don't be wrong, lots of business owners have got great insights to share with you. But I think like once that's done, it's like, okay, I need to now go and do my work now. Because I always remember like I actually left a client over this and then came back after this particular person was gone. They hired this new head of marketing who came in with the most like glittering CV imaginable, like NASA, Disney, all of these huge companies. You're thinking this person's a real player. Absolute disaster. Like I remember being in a Google Doc and writing a campaign and just seeing somebody else appear. And on the line I was writing, they were overwriting what I was writing. Now, I'll be honest with you, unlike you, Cole, I don't have corporate manners. You know, I'm not some Neanderthal, but this was for a bigger company and I thought, I really don't know how to handle this because I know how I want to handle it. And by the way, that was me being wrong. I shouldn't have. I had enough awareness to like, you know what, don't go to this person directly because you're not going to cover yourself in glory. You're just going to say something that's rude and inappropriate. Correct, but rude and inappropriate. So I had to go around and find somebody else to speak to the person, and then it was a whole thing, and they'd done it again after that, you know, and you're just like, imagine like you're on a sales call and somebody came in and just, oh, just to interject here, guys, if I could just pick up one call and saying, you'd be like, get the fuck off this phone right now. So I think but it's also a good sign that the person you're working with like really trusts you. And I mean, any of the clients I've been with for a long time, will tell you like they've never had to correct a line or you know, worry about the work that I put out for them or anything like that. So I also make it clear I understand what's at stake here. I understand that in a lot of ways. I know you said there I'm now doing more LinkedIn ghostwriting as a new service, but I've always been a ghostwriter in a way because even my direct response copy, which has been more focused on emails and sales pages, has been for people who are large public figures. Some of these people had like millions of followers. So like, I know the words I write. It's you that gets the DMs. It's you that gets the response. So I am fully aware of the stakes here. So I think that's on me to make that clear, which I always have done. But yeah, just let people do their job. Just let people do their job. And you know what? See if they can't do their job, then you'll find out and you can go and get somebody else to do it, you know?
That's right. And I think people who are maybe business owners listening to this or leading a team in their work, just empowering the people within that team to go and do their thing.
Yeah.
And again, be on their shoulders. So like I sit on a number of different teams calls with junior colleagues that work in our London team, and I'll maybe open the call and then I'll let them run it. Now, like you were saying there, you don't want to be like, and just interject on what Sarah was saying or what Jamie was saying. That sounds so bad and it undermines them in front of a client. It's more of a case of like, if they ask a question and they look to me to be like, Cole, like, what is the spec on the mattress, or call, what is the lead time on this, or like, how would we handle a failed delivery, or whatever it is. And I can be like, oh, well, from my experience, it's this. And they're then learning from me. I'm not going in there to do their job for them. And they get all the commission on the deal, whatever happens. I'm just there to, like, as a, like, almost like a coach to sit within that session. And it's thinking about from, like, if you're a business leader listening to this, or somebody that manages a team, giving your team the chance to fall forward, as Nico said, make mistakes, learn from them, you coach them off the back of it. Don't go in and cut their grass in front of other people or undermine them in something they've worked on. Of course, like, if somebody does a presentation slide or sends out some outbound emails and I think they could have done better, we have like a formal process for me being like, guys, our format for outbound email is the 3 whys. You've got no why me at the start of this. Like, we need to redraft this. But it's not undermining them off the back of that. It's still empowering them to, like, do that work initially, and then we have like a formal process for improving on it. Yeah,
exactly. And I also think, like, again, if you're like a business owner listening to this, like, if you're like kind of maybe getting involved in other processes that you've hired people to do, you need to realise, like, you're not giving that your full attention. You're just coming in, interjecting a little bit and messing up with, like, the vibe. Now, obviously, like, there's going to be times where you can maybe look at a campaign and go, oh, this has completely missed the mark. So you need to have, like you said, those checks and balances in place if you know, to make, if that makes you feel more comfortable. But, like, when somebody's actually within the process and they're trying, you know, maybe, like, try to get a good sense of, like, okay, well, how are you approaching this project? What are the goals here? Why have you taken this angle with this and that? I think, like, maybe having more of a measure of the people you're working with, and again empowering them to do their best work. Which, honestly, like, and I know, like, I've hired people before. I've had, you know, we had a great cooperator working with us for 2 years, done fantastic work. Sometimes campaigns flopped. You know, you have to give people room to fail. You know, it's just like, if you think everybody's going to come in and be like a wild success, especially in marketing, because you're just going to have the most carefully planned campaigns that you think are just going to be phenomenal, and then it's like crickets sometimes. So I think if you're willing to give people a little bit of grace, which I understand,
it's a big green flag, isn't it?
It is a big green flag. You know, like me and David will tell you, we've had a couple of launches that didn't hit the targets that we set. We were like, oh, okay then, well, let's have a look at why that is, and we've always learned from it and never actually repeated the same mistake. So having that a relationship with the people working with you, working for you, is only going to lead to good things, I think.
My green flag for business then, high agency people, and that's defined as people who actively seek to influence their situations rather than responding what happens to them. That for me is the type of people that I like to be surrounded by. People that something happens and they don't immediately shit the bed or panic or throw the toys out the pram. They're like, right, okay, how do we deal with this? And, like, high agency is like a term that's now booming, and it's increased. I actually looked this up. In 2024, the analytics site Brandwatch found that there was a 500% jump in mentions of the phrase high agency on X. So it's a trait that people recognise is really important. It's probably linked to things like personal responsibility, or
George Mark's done
a big job promoting
that. Like, to be fair, that was that essay was incredible. Like, it really, like, I remember that was one of the things I read, and I was like, actually sat in silence for a good few minutes after it, being like, wow, like, that's really blown my hair back.
It's a great trait to have, because it enables you to take accountability for the situation you're in and look for a way forward that's positive for you, the business, or whoever you're working for.
Yeah.
And I love being surrounded by those type of people, because they err on the side of solution rather than problem.
100%.
They're not a head in the sand like, oh, that's not a problem, but they never panic. It's actually really funny. One of my friends said to me, he was like, if, like, shit hits the fan, like, it's often you that I'll be like, what should I do? Because you'll be like, oh, that's unfortunate. Have you ever thought about? And then I'll give them a solution. And I think that's, like, there's, like, some friends you go to for, like, a mope and a cry, and then there's some friends you go to like, mate, this has just happened. What would you do? And I think those are the high agency people that you go and seek out. Like, it's the whole, like, who's your most high agency friend? Who would you phone if you were in, like, a South American jail with one phone call to make to get you out?
Yeah.
That's a great framework to be like, who am I going to phone? Oh, I'd phone him.
Yeah, that's funny, because, like, I sent that article to David and he texted me back saying, you would be the person.
100%. You are one of those guys.
Which I was genuinely surprised about. It sounds like I've just paid myself a compliment there, but, like, I was like, all right, okay. And my wife said the same thing, and I was like, it's not just because your husband does it. She's like, no. I think, like, it's because, like, I think that's who I would phone. But, like,
you're extremely practical. But you, like, again, like, we've spoken about emotional control and awareness on other podcasts, and you've demonstrated that many times over. But you are somebody that's like, what are we going to do now? Well,
that is genuinely like what I default to. I think like the one thing on, if you read the article, you'll see you can kind of score yourself. I think in the article it gives you the one thing that I'm slightly lacking in, which I've worked on since reading the article, was a bias towards action for myself. Like I'll default more to planning mode. But like,
Same.
but yeah, I'll default more to that rather than just be like, let's just go and do something, you know. But if somebody I will say, if somebody was to come to me with a problem, I'd be like, right, okay, let's go and fix it then. I think it's such the way that, I don't know if George Mack came up with the term, but like the way it's encapsulated in like his work and everything around high agency, I'm like, yeah, that is the trait that is just overwhelming. It's just like there's no downside to it, you know. You just, if you encounter any type of problem, and see when I look back, see when you kind of reflect on like, so when I, again, to go back to when I was starting to sign copywriting clients, I was just like, I don't have any money, I don't have any contacts, I've got a Gmail account, and I've got a bunch of people in the fitness industry that I've followed that I know have email lists that suck. I'm just going to email all of them and keep emailing them until they either tell me to piss off or get on a call.
You were action orientated.
Yeah, yes, you know what I mean? So it was like, I've got this problem. I don't have copywriting clients. How do I solve this problem? Start asking for more work, you know? So it can be as simple as that. But yeah, I love that you included that, because I just think like it's becoming very trendy, and I know that people are going to like, again, like meme it out of existence and start to attach it to being like, oh, so you're such a bro trait. But I'm like, what is the downside to being a high agency person? It's something that we can, and the great thing about it is, like, I think George Mark tweeted this the other day, it's like the best thing about high agency is that you have agency over the amount of agency you have. So you can actively increase it. I just love it. It's just such a powerful idea. It's
really funny. So in my day job, there's so many moving parts in order for the big projects, the big orders to install. So there's operations who actually will install the furniture. There's stock who'll order the furniture. There's our product team who'll specify what that product looks like. And then there's customer service that will arrange the volume of items to be in the right warehouse so the ops team can go and take it. So there's so many moving parts. Anytime one of them like shits the bed or panics about a curveball, it's me that pulls it all together. And as a sales director, that's actually quite rare. Normally the sales guy rides off into the sunset and is like, just go and deal with that. Yeah. But I really like to make sure that what I've sold comes into fruition in the way that I've sold it at the time I've sold it. And that's a great trait for keeping customers, for example. Like retention's massive.
Yeah.
But whenever something goes wrong, like a curveball comes up, it's always a case of like, okay, well, that might be the case, but what's the next best case scenario that we can work on to try and alleviate the issue that we've got? Whereas people do throw their hands up in the air, or they're like, oh, it's never going to happen on time, or oh my God, it's going to cost so much more. You're like, maybe, but not if we try and do something to like some sort of affirmative action to address this. And I think that's like a mark, and it always tests me from like a high agency perspective. Like, oh, this container's delayed coming from the Far East to land in Dover. What are we going to do? I'm like, okay, well, are there any other suppliers that sell something that's remotely similar that I might pay a little bit more for, but we're still going to get it on time? Like, and in that moment, the people are like on the other end of the Teams call or the phone call panicking, and you just have to be in your rational, calm brain. And I don't know whether you're wired that way or you just get the opportunity to grow that. I think fitness helps with it, because I've just got total agency of like how I look, how I feel. Didn't get a PR on incline press today. Okay, well, I didn't sleep as well last night. Haven't been eating as well. That's why. Take responsibility. Guess what? Next time round, maybe sleep a bit better, maybe go to the gym with a bit more food in your system, etc., etc. You take accountability for it.
100%. I think like, I might sound like contradict myself here, but I think like where you need to be maybe more careful of agency is, and again, this is a bit of a cliche in a bit, I mean, but like you're prone to be a fixer, and within a relationship, that's not a good thing. It generally isn't, because sometimes your partner just wants to vent and just to get that emotional connection with somebody that they understands their feelings, and once they have that connection and that understanding, they feel immediately better about their situation. And I was always a fixer, so if my wife ever came to me with a problem or something that she was venting, I would just automatically go, obviously it's my wife, you know, so obviously I'm like, if you're feeling bad, that's unacceptable, I need to fix this situation immediately. And it's like, that's not always what you want to do, but I think that's the only situation I can think. Now, bear in mind, it's only temporary. Like, you need to tone down your agency a little bit to understand. But then if it progresses to a problem that does need fixed, you need to flick that agency back up to then be like, okay, if this is now something that actually needs fixed, then here's what I think we can do about it. If it's went past the stage of, do you know what, this wasn't just like an emotional connection I was seeking here, this is a problem and I really want to fix it. It's like, okay, here's our options, let's go.
One of the first episodes that I got a bit of heat from, and it was 130 odd episodes in, was Adam Lane Smith, the
yeah,
attachment specialist.
Yeah.
And he was speaking about why male therapy should differ from female therapy. And typically females want to be heard, seen and listened to. Males want to be armed with solutions and ways forward. So in the same way... I can't
believe you've just said that on this podcast.
Unbelievable. Chauvinist male pig. And right-wing thug. And he expanded that out in the same way. Your wife comes home from work, she had a problem with somebody at work. You immediately jump to, oh, well, have you spoken to the manager to like raise this concern? Whereas they might just want to be like, oh, they were a bit of a bitch to me today. Like, I can't believe they said this. They want to be seen, felt and heard. Whereas you jump straight away to like, oh, well, how can we alleviate this problem for you? How can we get her disciplinary action for what she said to you?
Let me slash her tires.
Yeah, exactly. And when Adam expanded upon that, you can understand. And he gave like a helpful phrase of like, you can be like, do you want me to like hear you out about this problem, or do you want me to come in with solutions? And almost just like checking before you then go into lower agency mode, more empathetic, like listening, like, oh, I can't believe that happened. Like, what was that like? How did that go? Rather than being like, right, how do we fix this? What do we do next? Like, let's get an action plan. Like, tomorrow we're going to check in on whether you've done this.
Yeah, so true. I think that's where you've got to maybe have a bit more of your kind of finger on the dial of your agency. But yeah, that's a really... I remember that episode. I think that was the first time I'd ever heard somebody put it in that way, like the differences between, you know, the therapy outcomes, if you like. It was really, really interesting. And I think it probably speaks to, like, again, the agency side of things, of how you are looking for, you're more inclined towards like solutions. And I think, like, again, a bit of kind of self-reflection, I think I've naturally been that way. So that's a natural maybe trait that I have for whatever reason. But again, the trait that I maybe don't have is the bias for action, because I am prone to overthinking and over planning before taking action. So like personally, and I just say this just because like people listening will probably find themselves looking at the agency traits and just being like, okay, well, what kind of things that you know, it's made up of certain traits. If you understand what they are, you know which ones you need to work on to get your agency up to where it needs to be to start making some big moves in your life. Totally
agreed, and that self-awareness comes with time too.
Yeah.
In the time we've got left, Chris, do you want to pick a red flag from one of the other ones that we've not done? So you've got one left for brain, you've got one left for business, you've got one left for body. Okay. What do you fancy?
What have I got? I've got I think we should go. Oh yeah, I'd like to do this one actually. Yeah, going back to brain. I think having a permanent chip on your shoulder. I think that you eventually need to move on from that form of motivation. And
have you ever used that as motivation? Not
really. It doesn't. It's not in my makeup. I don't get anything from proving people wrong. Probably genuinely because I've not had a lot of it in my life, but to be fair, I have had, like, a good example would be like, I've had certain coaches at rugby that I just did not get on with at all. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that in different sports or whatever, or even as a manager.
Like face doesn't fit sort of thing?
Yeah, face doesn't fit, your playing style doesn't fit, whatever it is, they just don't like you. I was never motivated to like prove them wrong. I actually found out again through like kind of looking at like, I just hyper fixate on how much I dislike the person. So I actually don't do the things to prove them wrong, right? So that's just an insight into who I am as a person. But yeah, so I think like the classic example is Tom Brady, isn't it? He's the ultimate chip on your shoulder, like Mount Rushmore, Hall of Fame, you know, 7th round pick, goes on to be the most successful quarterback of all time, most successful football player of all time, like ultimate athlete. And then on one level, are you Tom Brady? No. So relax. And also, if you're hanging on to like what a teacher said to you in school, I understand if it's part of your makeup and it gets you going, I think that's great. I think if you're trying to make any type of move in life, if you're trying to be successful, I truly believe whatever gets you from 0 to 1, use it. Just get it, because it's that's the hardest part, isn't it? Getting momentum and getting off the ground, whether it's signing your first few clients, whether it's, you know, getting that big job, and whatever it is, like just do whatever you need to do to get that. But have enough, again, awareness to be like, right, you know what, that's not going to serve me all the time, because you're going to be in conflict mode all the time. You're going to be looking for slights all the time. You're going to be going in and you're going to be combative. And I understand that's something you might have to do within certain roles, certain industries, but then don't have this on top of it. Don't work in an industry where you maybe have to be a bit more combative and a bit more, you know, have a bit more back and forth. Elbows out, and then also be purely motivated by a chip on your shoulder. You know, like if you're dragging around stuff from high school and you're in your 30s, I've got to wonder, like, come on, mate.
That
like,
fuel can only last so long.
Yeah.
Hermose's great on this. He talks about 0 to 1, for example, and he's like, prove them wrong, use that as your driver to do the hard thing when people are doubting you.
Right.
Great, but it can't last forever because it's not an infinite fuel. It can last a while, I'm sure, but it drags on, and it maybe makes you do things that are maybe out of alignment as well sometimes.
I think it would. I think it would drag you into certain situations that you just had no business being in, you know, whether it's chasing certain clients or, you know, try to go up against a competitor, and it distracts you from your actual goal of growing your company or landing a better client, you know. I mean, we've all been through life and had people that have like slighted us, and like I remember like Mike, again, to go back to Mike Samuels, I remember I sent him a review of his first copywriting course, but I wrote it in my first attempt at copywriting. And I remember it was like Mike Samuels is a fraud, and it was an acronym, and it was like fucking really amazing, upstanding dude. So cringe, right? But that was the subject line or something, right? And he shared it in the group and went, oh, this is a guy, and this guy commented on it and just rinsed me, just destroyed me. It was just, he actually said at the end of the comment, he said something like yuck. And I was like, that's what he said right at the end. Just totally rinsed me. I'm like, but I don't know the guy's name. I don't have the screen.
It didn't stay with you. Okay, I
don't have it as my background on my phone. You know, I just feel like I'm careful. I'm trying to be careful words because I know people are motivated, inspired by different things, and you know, again, my makeup isn't to be, you know, have a chip on my shoulder, you know. But I just feel like once you maybe get to a certain level of success, surely there are other things around you that maybe lean more towards the positive. So, you know, so now I'm purely motivated by my wife, my daughter, and our life, and the vision we have for our life.
Amazing.
That's what drives me every single day, and that's what every decision is filtered through. I just think that's a way more positive and healthy way to go about things than, you know, dragging up comments from, even if it's like parents or old employers or things. I'm just like, what is going on in your head?
Yeah.
You must be walking every day like an absolute psycho, just like a wee pit bull, you know, with all these negative comments swirling around your head. Just like, can you relax and realise that the more positive side of the thing is just as motivating, and just as driving, you know.
Interestingly, I have used spite to drive me at different times.
Oh yeah.
See, when I've needed to bite down on the gum shield. I'll give a really silly example before I give a better example. Maybe like 2014, just finished uni, so stopped getting access to the Glasgow Uni gym, so started training at the local council gym. Stopped playing rugby at that point, so my brother and I are training at the Allender Leisure Centre in Glasgow. I'd built like a reasonable physique by that point. I had biceps and abs, bit of shoulders, no legs, right?
Aye.
And I was wearing my wee rugby shorts, not playing rugby anymore, but still trying to cling on to it. And I remember being on like a night out, Sanctuary or whatever, what is now Wonderbar West End. I remember somebody from the gym being like, oh, see you in the gym a lot, how you getting on, mate? Like, you're in quite good shape. But these boys that are training there like always say like, you've got no legs. Like, two guys that he trained with, and I was like, they say I've got no legs. What the fuck? But it rang true because they were out of balance with how I was. But genuinely, like, I remember like going in on the Monday and I started doing legs like much harder because I was like, I'll prove them wrong. That like they're like, oh, he's got good arms and abs, but he's got no legs. And I was like, I kind of do have no legs, but I'm gonna prove you wrong to like get like better legs. And I remember like on a Monday and a Thursday, I would just absolutely kill myself. I would do like these Smith machine hack squats, and they were absolutely horrible. Talk about movements that like work for you that people that people will be like, oh, that's overrated. You're like, nah, mate. Like, put your hood up, put on some old Eminem, and do those, right? So I genuinely smashed my legs twice a week for like about 2 years, and I genuinely most nights would think like, well, those Mondays and Thursdays, I would think about, oh, those guys said you had no legs, and it got me started. Now I never even think about it, never even like counts as it. I bring it up as an example in a podcast, but like that made me train those legs harder for a couple of years to be like, oh, fuck them, like I'm not just somebody that like does the beach muscles, I'm gonna do these as well. And it got me started. It didn't keep me going, but it was like a nudge in the right direction. And on the days where I was like, oh, why don't I just do like 2 sets of lunges rather than like 3, or why don't I use like the 22s rather than the 26s and the straps that I've got? I was like, nah, fuck it. I'm going to prove those two idiots wrong.
That's great, man.
And it's helpful at that moment in time. In the same way, I'll give a better example. When I moved from the world's biggest insurance broker, Marsh, in the insurance profession, where you wear a blue suit, you wear a tie, you go to nice meetings, you fly into the city of London, you get a DLR along to Tower Place and you shake hands and you look all prim and proper. To the furniture industry where I was selling to student accommodation, nowhere near as glamorous, wear quarters at most of the time, that's the smartest I'll get. A lot of colleagues were like, oh, why would you do that?
Yeah,
like,
it's a step back.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
what on earth are you thinking? Like, oh, it's not a regulated profession. Like, you've done your exams for your Cert AI and you're working towards your diploma AI. Why would you go to a profession where you don't need that? And I understand why they would think that, but I knew that I was capping myself on what I was capable of in terms of the deals I was working on. So when I moved, I was like, I kind of feel like I need to prove that I've made the right move, not to them to a large extent, but to myself. And in the moments where I maybe hadn't booked my 6 meetings that I was targeted for that week, I was maybe sitting on 2 or 3 and it was Thursday afternoon. I was like, well, I should make those calls because those people that are back in the insurance industry are desperate for me to come back with my tail between my legs, being like, I never made it to be a 6-figure sales guy. In fact, I had to come back and work in the Glasgow office again and work on accounts that have got absolutely no hope because I'm the 4th BDM in a team of 4 and I've got not getting the opportunities that I want to get. So on those moments in 2021 and early 2022, when I was building my client book where I am now, I would think like, I bet they think I'm going to be crap in this role, or I'm not going to make it, or I'm not going to do as well, and that I'm just a furniture salesman. And my brother and I used to joke like, oh, I'm DFS Campbell, like sofa sales. It was really funny. What the biggest sofa deal that I did was something like 180 grand ex VAT last year, and my brother was like, mate, not bad for DFS. And I love that humor because like we kind of joked, like people be like, oh, he's just a way to punt mattresses and whatever, but like I was making more money than ever before and being involved in deals that like stimulated me, pushed me. So there were times where I used the motivation of people saying I was in crap, like had crap legs, to push my legs hard, and then I used the motivation to like make the cold calls, do the follow-ups, when I thought the people back at that big insurance broker were probably like, I can't believe he went to working in insurance. He went and working furniture. What on earth is he doing? So it can be a driver short term, but it's a limited fuel. And then you need to move on to the positive stuff of, I want to progress my career. I want to be involved in bigger deals. I want to enjoy myself. I want to train for longevity and look good and feel good for me, not just for 2 dweebs. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think like what you said there reminded me, like my last season at rugby going into the pre-season, I kind of had a bit of that fuel, but again, it wasn't from anybody else. It was actually self-generated because I was like, I am going to be the fittest person down here while being like the 2nd or 3rd oldest in the team. You know what I mean? Like I'm going to be running laps around the young boys. Like, so it was more like that gave me that little bit of motivation, a little bit of a chip on my shoulder because I was looking at myself, you know, as like, you know, well, are you going to actually measure up to that? Are you actually going to do what you said you were going to do, sort of thing? So I think like there's ways and versions of that that get generating that chip in your shoulder. Sometimes it is by you creating a future image of yourself and being like, that's who I'm going to be. This is who I am right now. Right, okay, let's get there. And sometimes a little bit of negative self-talk in a good way is being like, well, you said you were going to be running laps around these boys. That means you can't skip your cardio outside of training sessions. You need to do your conditioning. You actually need to put the foot down at pre-season rather than just like hanging about the middle of the pack talking to your pals. You know, you're here to train hard. So I think like there's definitely, like I say, that links to what you were talking about when we were talking about identity. Your identity was, I'm going to be the fittest guy, so I better act like the fittest guy.
You had to.
And having those little mantras or those little things in the back of your head that sit alongside the positive stuff, the carrot and the stick.
Yeah. Knowing when to pull which one out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Ferguson had the hairdryer for players at Man United, or he had the armour of the shoulder.
Yeah.
He knew when to fluctuate between the two, and that's why Sir Alex had so much success, because he knew how to motivate people. And we all know that there'll be particular times, and you say that you're very rarely driven by a bit of a chip in the shoulder, but there'll be people listening to this that should be like, I can't believe that teacher or that ex-work colleague said that to me. Use it in the moments you need it. Rely on the moments you need it, but realise that it can be fleeting.
Yeah, 100%. Totally agree.
In the time we've got left, Chris, I'm going to give us one more green flag to end on a positive note, and it's for body, but it's applicable for all.
Okay.
And it's going to be on focusing on raising your floor rather than always focusing on lifting the ceiling. One of the big mistakes I see people make when it comes to their brain, their body, their business is that they're always trying to have like the perfect day or the perfect routine. Whereas if you can improve what your average day looks like, or even your worst day looks like, you're going to get a lot more progress. If I look at my week, like my worst ever training week will be better than a lot of people's best ever training week because of what the minimum standard I hold myself to. If I look at what my nutrition looks like on my worst ever week, it's to a quite high standard. If I look at my worst ever sleeping week, it's probably reasonable. In the same way when it comes to like outbound email, outbound call, meetings with new prospects, meetings with existing clients to try and upsell them. It's better than the average salesperson. So I'm just trying to eke up that floor rather than always being like, oh, but on my A day, I am flying. I do this, and I meditate for 45 minutes in the morning, and I have an 8-minute ice bath rather than a 5-minute ice bath. That's cool, and having like those days where you knock it out of the park. But see the days where like your minimum viable output is of a good level, that's going to accumulate much more and allow us to compound.
Yeah, totally agree. I think like maybe links back to what I said earlier about like, are you giving yourself a chance to be successful? Are you giving yourself the kind of setup in your, like, 'cause I imagine your minimum day is fairly easy, not easy, but simple to achieve because of how your routine is set up and how certain habits are ingrained in you. So I think like obviously habits can take a while to ingrain in yourself, but there's definitely some things that you can do to your routine that just have a knock-on effect that make that floor so much easier to reach each day. Go to your bed on time, lay out your stuff the night before, do some meal prep. Again, I know it's stuff you've already heard before, but that's what
the cliches are cliches for a reason.
Exactly,
that's correct.
That's why it helps. That's why you're able to have like, you don't have days where it's just a complete disaster. Again, to go back to actually like the Nassim Taleb, he talks about how like, the concept in Anti-Fragile about like avoiding ruin. That's how you gain like success in life, and whether it's wealth or physical health or whatever, is like avoid ruin. So like he's obviously a former investment banker. He's like, you're avoiding, being like Lehman Brothers, and being so far, in the red that you go under.
It's similar to the whole don't multiply by zero.
Yes.
So when you're driving along, don't have your seatbelt off playing on your phone. That's multiplying by zero. You could have the best breath work practice and journaling practice, and you could have an amazing relationship at home, but when you crash, you're multiplying by zero.
Yeah.
In the same way, don't tan a monster at 6 o'clock at night, because it's not ever going to serve you. Or you might have a good gym session that night, but your sleep's going to be ruined off the back of it, and then your training the next day's crap. To bring it to life, Chris, like what does your floor look like when it comes to output for copy? It's probably really pretty good.
Yeah.
Whereas your ceiling is amazing, right? But you've just basically raised up your floor to be a reasonable output every single day. And then guess what? Across the week, you're kind of like, that looks pretty good. Even if you didn't have like any 10 out of 10 days, you're kind of like, oh, well, my output was still quality.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think you don't really realise until you maybe compare it to others. Again, go back to comparison, you don't really, because obviously you know it's hard to get, I know I've spoke a lot about perspective, it's hard to get perspective on your lifestyle and the things you do, isn't it, without some form of comparison. So when I talk to other copywriters and I hear they're like, oh yeah, it took me 3 days to write, 4 or 5 emails. I'm like, oh, I'm averaging like 20, 25 a week for clients alone.
Yeah, that's a morning with a white monster and some creatine.
And some creatine and some Eric Pritz on. Look, man, I'll smash those bad boys out, no problem. So yeah, I think like that comparison piece can help you realise like, okay, this is where my floor is. But again, I think you probably need to spend a bit of time like figuring out, okay, well, what is that like? So how many gym sessions is it per week? So because it's probably more like, I don't know how to put this, but like you're maybe not thinking too much of like, say it's in the gym, you're not thinking too much about the weights you're lifting or what you're, it's like, no, I had 3 decent sessions this week. I'm not too fussed about like what the numbers were in those sessions, but I showed up, trained pretty hard, was nowhere near my best, but I showed up 3 times and I put in some good sessions. I maybe wasn't completely on point with my nutrition, but I wasn't on Uber Eats every second day, and I wasn't having a snackathon every single night. So it maybe takes you a little while to figure out like what your floor is.
And it's increasing that floor over time.
100%.
So I want to look back in a year and be like, my floor for the number of sales coaching clients or the amount of quality content I put out from the podcast is higher than it was prior.
Yeah.
And that's what we measure ourselves by. Again, comparison is the thief of joy if we compare ourselves to something that's unattainable. But if we compare ourselves to like a previous version of ourselves or the aspirational for ourselves in the future, then that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah. I mean, like, again, to give a personal example, like you could wake me up out the deepest sleep, drag me into the gym, and I'll bench 120 kilos for a rep or 2, right? Now, that's not impressive because I'm a larger guy, but like bench is by far my weakest. So, but I know like this is the example of like, that's my floor. I know like the rough numbers in the gym that I can hit for the amount of reps to be like, yeah, do you know what? If I'm doing that, if there's something below that, something's went wrong.
My floor's falling below where I hold myself.
So I'm either I'm eating like a complete arsehole, I'm not sleeping well, you know, all of these things aren't ticking boxes. Same for like business, you know, and copy. You know, I've got my outputs that I know that I hit these at minimum every single week. Also helps the fact I've got like weekly deliverables for clients. But yeah, I think it's a really good idea to have a really good sense of that. But I think, like, I don't know if you agree, but like, so I've just done 12-week peak. So I now have a new floor for, you know, my body composition.
It's a standard you hold yourself to.
Yeah, so I think like probably your floor raises through doing more intense sprints. And then you pull back a little bit, like I was saying before we came in, like I lost 11.5 kilos on the 12-week peak. So I started at like 106 kilos. But I've put on like 3 or 4 now. But I'm sitting there pretty. I'm on 3,000 plus calories a day. Like, I'm not hammering the steps up at 15, 16,000 like I was. So obviously my floor has changed there, and I'll do it again next year, and that'll be a more intense period, and then my floor will change again. So I think like within your floors and your ceilings, you're probably going to have more intense sprints focused on something, whether it's business, you know, like my copywriting business hasn't been below, you know, I think it hasn't been below 12k recurring revenue since I started it in January 2020. You know, since September 2020, started in January 2020, got to that landmark in like September, October 2020. It's not been below that since. It's not been close to below that since. So like, you're like, that's my floor. And if I ever got anywhere below that, I would be like, right, I need to switch on high agency mode to fix some things. So I think, yeah, with a bit of a time and experience and some intense sprints, you'll probably find
we can raise both.
Yeah, you can raise both, definitely, 100%.
Yeah, Chris, really cool note for us to wrap up on. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation, as we always do. But you've changed your handle for where people need to go and follow you. Do you remember it for us?
Good research. Yes, I'm now Storyseller Chris on Instagram. So you can find me on there. And yeah, send my DM, or you can hit the link.
Pop your LinkedIn in there as well.
Pop my LinkedIn. I've just started posting again on LinkedIn. I thought, got to walk the walk if you're going to be ghostwriting for people. So yeah, I'm back on there as well.
Amazing, Chris. Both of those will be linked in the show notes. Thank you to you, Chris, and thank you to the listener. I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.